Have you ever really stopped to think about how a nation remembers its toughest times? I mean, what role does that memory actually play in keeping its democracy safe? Today, we're doing a deep dive into a really critical moment in India's history, the 50th anniversary of the emergency. So, our mission here is to unpack the recent events marking this anniversary, specifically the Samvidhan Hatya Diwas Constitution Murder Day observed by the Ministry of Culture and the Delhi government. We want to figure out what these commemorations, these powerful statements, tell us about India's democratic commitment and the lessons learned, and we've got quite a bit to draw on. Official statements, speeches from people like Shri Amit Shah, Shri Gajendra Singh Shekhawat, Samantaran Gupta, Shri Vinay Kumar Saxena, Shri Ashwini Vaishnaw, plus details on an expedition, plays, a book launch, even a torch relay.
Yeah, what's really fascinating, I think, is how these aren't just backward-looking events.
No.
Not at all. They
Yeah.
seem to be actively trying to shape how future generations understand democratic values, making sure those principles challenged back then are really understood and protected now.
Exactly. And right at the heart of that is the whole point of Samvidhan Hatya Diwas. It's designed as this strong reminder, right? Safeguard constitutional values.
Mhm.
And it clearly resonated. The big names attended, the Union Home Minister, Culture Minister, Delhi's Chief Minister, the Lieutenant Governor. Quite the gathering.
Well, it's important to get why they'd want to remember such a dark chapter, as they call it. Shri Amit Shah actually said something interesting. Bad events are generally meant to be forgotten. However, when such events pertain to social and national life, they must always be remembered. He basically argued that remembering is vital for instilling the right values in young people, getting them ready to defend democracy so it never happens again. And that's apparently why Prime Minister Modi formalized June 25th as Samvidhan Hatya Diwas, specifically to teach younger folks about the dangers of authoritarianism.
Shah was also very direct about what he termed the dangerous ideology that emerged during the emergency. What exactly did he pinpoint there?
He laid it out pretty clearly, an ideology where the party is bigger than the nation, the family is bigger than the party, the individual is bigger than the family, and power is above national interest. And he drew a sharp contrast with what he called the current sentiment of nation first. It's a very pointed message about where loyalty should lie, according to him.
That's a stark contrast. And thinking about the bigger picture, the history, Shri Gajendra Singh Shekhawat brought up Bharat's long democratic tradition.
He did. He emphasized that democratic systems existed in India in various forms when the world could not even imagine the concept of democracy, which is quite a claim. But then he really hammered home the grave impact of the emergency itself, how freedom of expression was snatched away, and the tyranny witnessed during those 21 months still sends shivers down the spine. It makes you think about individual courage when things break down.
Right, and Delhi Chief Minister Vinay Kumar Gupta echoed that, calling for introspection. What was her main point?
She basically said, we have to remember a grave wrongdoing caused by those driven by their greed for power, leading to the subversion of the Constitution and the murder of democracy. And she used that powerful image that on June 25, 1975, the entire nation was turned into a prison. Really brings home the feeling of that time.
And Delhi's Lieutenant Governor, Shri Vinay Kumar Saxena, he talked about the Constitution's deeper meaning, crafted by Ambedkar and Rajendra Prasad to reflect the soul of Bharat, its ancient culture. What was he urging people to do?
He was pushing for people to truly understand that soul, not just, display copies of the Constitution. His point was because the emergency crushed democracy and essentially murdered the Constitution, we need to live its spirit, not just hold the document. It's about internalizing it.
The impact on freedom, especially the press, was another big theme. Shri Ashwini Vaishnaw called India the mother of democracy, but admitted that 50 years ago, our democracy was attacked. How did he describe what happened to the media?
He talked about how the media, the fourth pillar, was effectively silenced nationwide. The Press Council of India dissolved. But importantly, he also praised the courage of some media outlets and journalists who did resist, who stood up to that mindset. It's a reminder that even in dark times, there's pushback.
Okay, so beyond the speeches, there were these events designed to really immerse people in the history. Let's talk about the special exhibition. The 3 stages of Indian democracy sounds quite comprehensive. The first part, Bharat, mother of democracy, looked at India's ancient roots of participatory governance, sort of setting the stage.
Then the second part, very pointedly called Dark Days of Democracy. This was the visual record of 75 to 77. It showed the breakdown, the constitutional norms ignored, civil liberties suppressed, censorship, political repression,
Yeah.
all laid out visually. What's interesting is how this frames the whole journey, right? Ancient roots, then this moment of real vulnerability,
And leading into the third section.
right? Strengthening democracy in India. This highlighted the progressive strides made since then. Things like the Nari Shakti Vandan at Hiniam, that's the women's reservation bill,
Hmm.
direct benefit transfers for subsidies, digital ways to handle grievances, electoral transparency efforts. Basically, steps taken to fortify democracy.
It's a narrative of resilience, then, from ancient times through the crisis to rebuilding and strengthening. Okay, and besides the exhibition, there was cultural commemoration, too, theater and film.
Yes, a short film and a play. The play was by the National School of Drama called Samvidhan Hatya, The Murder of the Constitution. It apparently dramatized personal stories, institutional collapse. Likely a very emotional way to engage with that history.
Sounds powerful. But maybe the biggest buzz was around the book launch, the emergency diaries years that forged a leader.
Ah, yes. Sri Amanik Shah spoke at the launch, sharing some really interesting details from the book. It focuses on Prime Minister Sri Narendra Modi's role back then when he was a young Sangh Prakarak, a full-time RSS worker operating underground during the emergency. He was part of the movement led by figures like Jayaprakash Narayan and Nanaji Deshmukh.
And Shaw shared some specific stories from the book, right? About Modi's actions then.
He did. Apparently, the book details how Modi, who was only 25, would visit families of people jailed under the MISA Act, that controversial detention law.
Wow. Visiting their homes.
Yes, talking to their families, even arranging medical help, and also taking huge risks distributing secretly printed newspapers in markets. Among students, women trying to get information out past the censors.
That's incredible. And the disguises.
Oh yeah, that was a fascinating detail Shaw mentioned. How Modi apparently used disguises to move around, sometimes dressing as a saint, sometimes as a Sikh man, a Sardarji, sometimes even as a hippie, or selling things like incense or newspapers on the street.
It paints a picture of real grassroots resistance, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It highlights the kind of individual courage needed to fight back against authoritarian measures, even small acts adding up.
And Shaw connected this directly to Modi's later career, didn't he?
He did. He framed it as this 25-year-old Modi opposing the dictatorial ideas of the then prime minister. And he asserted the emergency was imposed to reinstate dynastic politics, something he claimed Modi uprooted from the entire country in 2014. A very clear political link being drawn there.
What about the book's structure? Does it cover different aspects?
Yes, apparently 5 main chapters. It covers media censorship, government repression, the role of the Sang and Jansang, stories of victims, and then the shift from dictatorship to public participation. So quite a wide scope.
Okay, and finally, rounding off the commemoration activities was this Loktantra Zindabad Yatra.
Right, a symbolic torch relay. Sri Amit Shah flagged it off. The idea is for this torch to travel across the country through villages and cities, serving as a living symbol of India's democratic spirit, a very visual representation of unity and democracy.
So, bringing this all together, what's the key takeaway for you, the listener? It seems these commemorations are sending some strong messages. Remember history, absolutely uphold the Constitution's values, and stay vigilant. Democracy needs constant protection.
Exactly. And if you look at the bigger picture, this whole deep dive really shows how historical memory isn't static. It's actively used, shaped, to reinforce national values and hopefully prevent repeating past mistakes. Which leads to a really important question for you listening. What actions, whether big or small, can individuals actually take today to really internalize that spirit of the Constitution, to make sure that soul of Bharat, as Lieutenant Governor called it, keeps thriving in its democratic ways? Something to think about.